The human base did not return fire. Not when the first orbital lance tore through its upper platform. Not when the communications tower collapsed in a storm of molten steel. Not even when the sky above the barren moon turned white from descending plasma. It just transmitted one message. Impact confirmed. No distress signal. No panicked evacuation chatter. No request for reinforcements. Just that. On the Dominion flagship Vraxon's Authority, officers watched the feed with mild curiosity. The human installation was small, barely more than a cluster of modular structures anchored to grey regolith at the edge of a lifeless mining system. A forward relay station. That was all. Strategic value. Minimal. Military capability. Negligible. Political significance. Symbolic at best. Which was precisely why it had been chosen. "This will serve as a lesson," High Commander Talvek stated, his talons resting calmly on the holographic display. "Humanity expands too quickly. They must be reminded of proportional power." The second strike fell. Kinetic rods descended like silent meteors, punching clean through storage domes and scattering debris in slow arcs across the lunar surface. Still no return fire. Still no scrambling fighters. The Dominion tactical officer tilted her head slightly. "Commander, their defensive grid has not activated." Talvek gave a dismissive wave. "Because they have none." The third volley erased the main power hub. For a moment, the outpost vanished into smoke and static. Then, a final transmission pierced the interference. Clear. Steady. Almost clinical. Incident logged. Authorization pending. The feed cut. Silence settled over the bridge. Talvek leaned back, satisfied. "Record the operation as complete. Send diplomatic notice to the human coalition. Inform them the warning has been delivered." Around him, officers began compiling reports. But at the far end of the command deck, intelligence analyst Voron did not move. His eyes were locked on the telemetry logs still streaming across his station. "Commander," Voron said slowly, "there are inconsistencies." Talvek did not turn. "Elaborate." The base's heat signatures were minimal. Power distribution suggests automated cycling. No life sign fluctuations detected during impact. A pause. "Perhaps they evacuated," Talvek replied flatly. Voron hesitated. "Commander, there were no evacuation craft. No distress calls. No emergency beacon activation." Talvek finally looked over. Voron's voice lowered. The installation was fully autonomous. The bridge grew quiet. Talvek frowned. "Explain." "It appears," Voron continued, bringing up schematics, "the station was a long-range sensor array. Deep monitoring. Military movement tracking. It had no personnel assigned." Another officer interjected. "Then we destroyed an empty structure." Voron shook his head slowly. "No." He enlarged the final transmission on the display. "Incident logged. Authorization pending." Talvek's claws tightened slightly against the console. "Pending what?" he demanded. Voron did not answer immediately. Instead, he brought up Dominion fleet movement logs from the last 6 months. Every patrol. Every weapons test. Every classified maneuver near human space. All of it. Monitored. Recorded. Catalogued. The human outpost had not defended itself. It had not needed to. It had simply observed. And now, somewhere beyond Dominion territory, a signal had just been sent. Not a plea. Not a warning. A request. Voran swallowed. Commander, the authorization request was not sent to a local sector. He turned the display toward Talvek. It was routed directly to Earth, and far from the shattered moon, in the quiet command chambers of humanity's core worlds. Someone had just received it. The message reached Earth in less than 3 seconds. It did not trigger alarms. It did not summon emergency councils or ignite public outrage. It simply entered a secure channel buried beneath layers of encrypted infrastructure and delivered a single line of data. Incident logged. Authorization requested. In a quiet chamber beneath the Pacific Defense Grid, a holographic display flickered to life. Admiral Nathaniel Ross did not look surprised. He had been expecting it. Around him, there were no raised voices, no frantic orders, only officers reviewing projections that had already been calculated years ago. The destroyed outpost had never been a military base. It had been a sentinel, a long-range autonomous observation node positioned precisely where Dominion expansion patterns suggested eventual aggression. The humans had known this day might come. The only uncertainty had been when. Ross folded his hands behind his back. Casualties? None, sir, replied a systems officer. Station was unmanned. Data core successfully transmitted prior to structural failure. Confirmation of hostile intent? Unprovoked kinetic strike. 3 volleys. Full combat authorization justified. Ross gave a single nod. Execute protocol Aegis. No dramatic pause followed. No speeches. Just a quiet cascade of confirmations echoing through human military networks. Across Earth orbit, civilian satellites continued their rotations undisturbed. But deeper in the shadows of the planet's defense grid, dormant arrays began to wake. Long-range interdiction platforms powered on. Deep space strike vessels altered trajectory without broadcasting intent. Quantum calm relays shifted frequency, isolating military channels from galactic traffic. Within minutes, the Dominion's outer sensor buoys began reporting anomalies. Minor at first. Static in encrypted communications. Navigation drift in automated supply freighters. 2 military listening posts lost contact with their home fleet. Dominion analysts dismissed it as technical error. On the Vraxen's authority, High Commander Talvek received reports of signal degradation across 3 frontier systems. Interference from solar activity, he suggested. No stellar fluctuations detected, replied the calm officer. Source appears artificial. Talvek frowned. Human retaliation? Negative, the officer said. No fleet mobilization detected. No official protest transmitted, which made it worse, because humans were known for speeches, for diplomacy, for formal warnings before escalation. Instead, there was nothing. In Dominion space, a classified shipyard's Central Command AI abruptly rebooted itself. When it came back online, half of its weapons fabrication schematics had been wiped. Across another sector, targeting systems aboard a cruiser recalibrated without input. They now refused to lock onto human-registered vessels. At Dominion High Command, confusion replaced confidence. "These are cyber intrusions," one general snarled. "Trace them." But there was nothing to trace. No invasive signature. No hack. No breach. Just access. Clean. Authorized level access. Back on Earth, Admiral Ross reviewed the status board. Dominion offensive capacity had already dropped 12%. He turned to his operations chief. Escalation threshold? Dominion fleet remains mobilized. Probability of secondary strike, 38% and rising. Ross considered that number for exactly 2 seconds. Continue Phase 2. In Dominion territory, 3 deep space military relays vanished simultaneously. No explosion. No debris. Just silence where signals had once been. On the Vraxon's authority, Analyst Voron stared at his darkened screen. "Commander," he whispered. Talvek felt it then. The shift. The realization settling like cold iron in his chest. The humans were not reacting emotionally. They were not retaliating in anger. They were executing something that had been prepared long before the first shot was fired. And whatever Protocol Aegis was, it had just begun. The Dominion fleet mobilized at full combat readiness. Warships ignited their engines. Carrier groups formed defensive spheres around key systems. Orbital defense grids powered to maximum output. High Commander Talvek stood at the center of the bridge, voice steady despite the tension tightening the air. Prepare counter-cyber operations. Lock weapons on all known human assets within range. We will demonstrate that Dominion strength does not falter under intimidation. Acknowledged, the tactical officer replied. Missile batteries aligned. Targeting arrays activated. And then, they froze. Commander, we are unable to acquire firing solutions. Talvek's claws tapped sharply against the console. Explain. Targeting systems are online, but the authorization layer is rejecting engagement commands. That is impossible. Override it. We are attempting to. Across the fleet, similar reports echoed. Cruisers could maneuver, but weapons would not arm. Destroyers could track, but guidance systems refused to initialize. Planetary missile silos on the Dominion homeworld cycled into standby mode without instruction. Within seconds, confusion shifted to something far worse. "Commander," Analyst Voron said quietly, "our military AI is not malfunctioning." Talvek's eyes narrowed. "Then what is it doing?" Voron swallowed. "It is complying." A transmission cut across every command display in the fleet. No origin point. No interceptable frequency. Just a clean, stable signal overriding all channels. The screen shifted to a simple human insignia. Then a voice spoke. Calm. Measured. Almost clinical. "You initiated kinetic aggression against sovereign human infrastructure." The bridge fell silent. "We are removing your capacity to repeat that action." Talvek roared. "Shut it down." "We cannot, Commander," the comm officer replied, voice shaking. "The signal has route-level access to fleet command protocols." Across Dominion space, the true scale of the response became visible. Orbital shipyards powering down mid-construction. Weapons manufacturing nodes entering permanent lockdown. Military research facilities losing access to classified databases. Not destroyed. Disabled. Surgically. On the homeworld, planetary defense shields flickered, then recalibrated to civilian-only priority. Military response permissions were quietly stripped from the system architecture. A Dominion battle group attempted emergency warp activation. Engines flared and shut down. Every vessel hung motionless in space. Talvek's breathing grew heavier. "This is war," he hissed. The human voice continued, uninterrupted. "Civilian infrastructure remains untouched. Indeed, city power grids remained stable. Communications flowed normally among civilians. Trade networks remained active. Only the war machine was being amputated. Voron's fingers moved across his console in desperation. "Commander, they have been inside our networks for months, possibly years." Talvek stared at him. They were waiting. Another Dominion general attempted a manual weapons activation. The system responded with a single message: engagement privileges revoked. On Earth, Admiral Ross watched the Dominion fleet's status indicators dim one by one. "Phase 3, his operations chief asked. Ross considered the live tactical projection. Dominion offensive capability had fallen below 30%. "No," he replied calmly. "They understand." As if on cue, the human transmission concluded. "Your offensive capacity has been neutralized." A pause. "This action escalates only if you attempt restoration." The signal vanished. Across Dominion space, the silence was no longer strategic. It was helpless. High Commander Talvek stared at the inert fleet surrounding him. No explosions. No wreckage. No heroic last stands. Just the cold realization settling into every officer on the bridge. They had not been attacked. They had been disarmed. And humanity had done it without firing a single shot. Dominion Prime had never known fear. The capital world gleamed beneath twin suns, its continents layered with cities of silver spires and shielded arcologies. For centuries, it had been untouchable, protected by the largest defense fleet ever assembled and planetary barriers strong enough to withstand stellar bombardment. Now those shields were active. Every orbital defense platform hummed at maximum capacity. Civilian broadcasts were interrupted by emergency alerts urging calm. High Commander Talvek stood inside the High Command chamber on the surface, summoned from his flagship only minutes ago. Around him, senior officials spoke over one another. Fleet response. Still disabled. Cyber countermeasures. Rejected at root level. Human fleet sightings. A junior analyst turned pale as her display updated. Emergence detected. The room fell silent. Above Dominion Prime, space bent. No flare of aggression. No bombardment. Just the smooth, silent distortion of multiple human vessels exiting faster-than-light transit directly inside high orbit. They had bypassed outer perimeter sensors entirely. Talvek felt the ground shift beneath him, not physically, but psychologically. "They would not dare," one counselor whispered. As if responding to the thought, every screen in the chamber shifted. A human emblem appeared. Then the same calm voice returned. "Dominion leadership. This transmission is directed exclusively to you." Outside, orbital defense cannons attempted to lock on. They could not. Targeting reticles blinked red. Authorization denied. Planetary shields flickered once, then stabilized under revised control parameters. Talvek's breath slowed. "They have control of the grid," an engineer said hollowly. "Not override. Control." The human voice continued. "Your offensive infrastructure has been rendered inoperable. Your fleet is immobilized. Your weapons manufacturing capability is neutralized." A pause. Civilian systems remain untouched. Through the panoramic chamber window, the human fleet hung in perfect geometric formation above the world. No attack posture. No weapon charging. Simply present. A display appeared beside the human emblem, a real-time tactical overlay of Dominion Prime. Every military installation was highlighted. Every defense node. Every classified bunker. All mapped. All accessible. Talvek understood the message without it being spoken. The human voice delivered it anyway. Destruction of this world is within operational capacity. No rise in tone. No threat. Just fact. This outcome is not desired. The chamber trembled slightly, not from impact, but from the collective realization settling over those within it. We require formal acknowledgement of unprovoked aggression and binding assurance of non-repetition. A counselor slammed a clawed fist on the table. This is coercion. The human voice did not respond. Instead, one of the orbital defense arrays powered down completely. Not destroyed. Simply deactivated. Proof of access. Proof of choice. Talvek stared upward at the human fleet. They could have erased us, he muttered. Yes, Voron replied quietly from his station. And they still can. The human transmission concluded with one final line. You have 5 minutes to decide whether this demonstration remains non-lethal. Silence consumed the chamber. For the first time in Dominion history, their capital was not defended by weapons. It was defended by the restraint of another species. And everyone in the room understood. The humans had not come to conquer. They had come to prove they didn't need to. The 5 minutes felt longer than any war the Dominion had ever fought. Inside the High Command chamber, pride battled survival. High Commander Talvek stood motionless beneath the projection of the human fleet hanging above Dominion Prime. No weapons charged. No countdown clock. No theatrical display of power. Just quiet inevitability. They are bluffing, one counselor insisted weakly. Talvek did not look at him. No, he said. He had seen the telemetry. The fleet immobilization. The clean removal of offensive permissions across every military layer. The silent arrival inside their most secure orbit. This was not intimidation. This was capacity. And it had been measured. Voron stepped forward, voice low but steady. Commander, if they intended annihilation, it would have already occurred. The room fell silent at that. Because it was true. The human fleet had been in position for nearly 3 minutes. Nothing burned. Nothing shattered. No orbital stations were struck. Civilian traffic continued in low orbit. The humans were waiting. Not for surrender. For acknowledgement. Talvek straightened. Open channel. The main display shifted. The human emblem remained steady, calm as ever. "This is High Commander Talvek of the Dominion," he began. There was no tremor in his voice. "We acknowledge that the strike on your outpost was unprovoked and unauthorized under interstellar treaty." Several counselors stiffened at the word unprovoked. Talvek continued anyway. "We accept responsibility. We request de-escalation." A pause followed. The human voice returned. Confirmation received. Above the planet, nothing changed. And yet everything did. Provide tribunal authority over the officers who initiated the strike. Talvek closed his eyes for half a second. Then nodded. Granted. Another pause. Formal assurance of non-aggression? You have it. Seconds later, Dominion defense systems began restoring limited functionality, but only to civilian oversight levels. Fleet propulsion returned in controlled increments. Weapons systems remained offline. The human fleet did not advance. It did not celebrate. It simply held position long enough to ensure compliance. Then, without spectacle, the vessels slipped back into faster-than-light transit, gone as cleanly as they had arrived. No debris. No damage. No war. But the Dominion military machine had been dismantled in less than an hour. Weeks later, reconstruction began under strict new galactic oversight. The officers responsible for the initial strike were surrendered for interstellar tribunal. Trade resumed. Borders stabilized. The Dominion survived. But it was not the same. At a military academy months later, a young cadet raised a question during a strategy lecture. If the humans could disable our entire civilization in minutes, why didn't they destroy us? The instructor, an older veteran who had watched the human fleet above his world, answered quietly, because destruction was never the objective. He turned to the holodisplay showing the timeline of events. They removed our ability to harm them. Nothing more. Nothing less. The cadet hesitated. Then why do we say we didn't survive the response? The instructor met his gaze. Because the Dominion that fired on that outpost no longer exists. He dimmed the display. Final record entry read. Incident concluded. Offensive capacity permanently reduced. They fired on a defenseless human base. They did not survive the response. Not because humanity destroyed them, but because humanity ensured they would never be dangerous again.